Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Jazakumullah khair for joining today. Inshallah, we're going to try to make up for some lost time. We had some technical difficulties trying to get Zoom to work. So, this is going to be an overview of what we're going to cover today. We're going to start with an introduction to what Umrah is, talk about how we can prepare for Umrah. We'll go over some of the fiqh and spiritual advices, and then give some practical advice. Mike? Oh, yeah, let me get it. That's good. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, starting with the virtues of Umrah, the Prophet ﷺ said that Umrah is an expiation for sins committed between it and the previous Umrah. And there's a couple of things that we can take from this. There's one thing that we understand from this is that the wa rahmatullahi wasi'ah, the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is extremely, extremely vast. In fact, He has sort of skewed the table in any which way that He can to try to make it so that we can succeed. And that's why there's so many different places in the deen where we see the same pattern of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgiving sins between two different actions that a person may do, right? From prayer to prayer, from Jummah to Jummah, from Umrah to Umrah, so on and so forth. And one of the things that we understand from this, taking maybe a comparison from how we treat cancer. So when a person has cancer, there's usually three stages of therapy. The first stage of therapy is something that we call induction. So they give them a very powerful chemotherapy to sort of wipe out the cancer. And after that, they give something called consolidation therapy to sort of firm up the eradication of the tumor. And then after that, if it's clear, then they still keep the patient on maintenance therapy to try to make sure that it doesn't come back. So you can see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sort of has created a maintenance therapy which is built in within the deen, right? Jummah from Jummah, Jummah from Jummah. Because the problem with us is that we keep on falling ourselves back into the cancer of sin, cancer of ghafla, cancer of heedlessness. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps on wiping out our sins, keep on wiping out our sins, even if we're not actively trying to treat ourselves. Right? He just does it automatically. The deen is built that way. But every now and then, right, if a person becomes so neglectful that the cancer becomes so big that it needs some serious treatment, right, then you need induction. You need to what we call re-induce the patient, and that's really what Umrah is, right? It's the powerhouse, it's the chemotherapy of the Deen, particularly Hajj, but at a smaller scale, the Umrah. The other thing that we realize from this is that Umrah is not a one and done type of thing, right? If it was, then what was the point in saying that it is an expiation between it and the previous Umrah? There is this sort of understanding that people keep on trying to revisit the Kaaba and create their own personal connection with the Haram. And that leads into the next topic, which is what if I've already gone, right? What can I expect? Why should I go again? What can I expect to go if I'm going again? And it's true that the first time always is going to be very special. We know that the Prophet ﷺ himself performed multiple umrahs during his lifetime, including an umrah at the beginning of his journey for Hajj. And the Prophet ﷺ had a very, very deep spiritual connection with the Kaaba. It was so much that when he had made hijrah and he was in Medina and could no longer face the Kaaba, he would keep on turning his face towards the sky without even really saying anything to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but just letting his heart speak. And what his desire was that he would want the Qibla to be turned towards Masjid al-Haram, to the Kaaba, because initially the Qibla was towards Masjid al-Aqsa, and that's exactly what happened. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, قَدْ نَرَى تَقَلُّبَ وَجْهِكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ فَلَنُوَلِّيَنَّكَ قِبْلَةً تَرْضَاهَا فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. May there be a million salawat and salam on that Prophet ﷺ, whose sight or glance was enough for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to turn the world upside down, right? His glance was enough for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to change the entire Qibla. And the Prophet ﷺ said, a servant who that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said that a servant whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted health and financial means, uh, what's that called? If that person is deprived, if he allows 5 years to go by without visiting me, meaning coming to the Kaaba. And what we understand from that is that when you're going to the Kaaba, you're not visiting, a black stone. The idea is that this is a journey towards Allah, right? And you're visiting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's something that needs to be kept in the back of a person's mind. It's not that Allah, billah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mahdud or he's circumscribed to some particular place or some particular time. That's not the case because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond that. But we do know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rahmah and the closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala occurs in certain places and it occurs in certain times. So for example, the Habbul Biladi ilallahi masajiduha, the most beloved places to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the masajid, wa abghadul biladi aswaquha, and the most abhorrent places are the aswaq. So the places where there's ma'siyah, the places where there's ghafla, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a person is going to feel farther away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In a place where, for example, there's the zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where there's a remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a person is going to feel closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's going to occur whether or not that occurs with time and occurs with places, right? So the masjid, you'll feel closer. It occurs at certain times. For example, people will feel closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Ramadan than they feel in other months. People will feel closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the time of the Hajj when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends to the lowest heaven. It's not like he's physically descending, but that closeness, right? It presents itself and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes more accessible. Right? Then it becomes easier to achieve this level of ihsan. أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تراه فإنه يراك, that you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you see him. So this is something to keep in mind when a person is making the sacred pilgrimage, when a person is making the sacred journey. The goal is not just to quote unquote make Hajj. The goal is not to quote unquote just make Umrah. The goal is that we want to come back with a very close relationship with Allah. Right? We want to come back with Allah as our friend. We want to come back with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being razi with us. We want to come back with these deep spiritual and a binding connection that will not fade. That's what we want to come back with. And it gives us, and that's the amazing thing about this, is that we get this opportunity. And when he says that, without 5 years to pass without visiting me, this is one of the very unique things that is worthy of mention, that this is really a magical place. There's no other place on earth where a person can go so unprepared, so far, so broken, and become so whole, right? People who are so distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so steeped in sin, they go and just step within the haram, and what's that called? They feel that they've been touched by the divine, right? And that's what it means because you're visiting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why it's such a special place. That's why it's induction chemotherapy. And this is something which appertains or attends to Muslims and even non-Muslims. Now you can say, how do you know about non-Muslims? Because non-Muslims until recently weren't supposed to get into the haram. Well, people have always been sort of sneaking by. And so there's one of my teachers, he had heard about a woman who had become very famed in the UK for her ibadah and her piety. And so, with proper separation, he went to go and find out what was her story. And so she said that, her and her husband, she was a Christian, her husband was a Jew. They were living working in Saudi at that time. And, it just sort of came in their mind. They're like, let's go and see what this Kaaba thing is all about. And so they went incognito, right? So she put on probably a jilbab and he probably wore a topi or something and just tried to look like they were Muslims. They got past the guards and they got into the haram. Just to honestly, just go and see what it's like. So they walk in and she said that I look over to my husband. She said, I looked at it. I was in tears. I look over at my husband. He's in tears. And she just asked him one question. She said, is it the truth? And he said, yeah, this is the truth. There wasn't a single word of da'wah. There wasn't a single ayah of Quran read. There's nothing. They were visiting God, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates this situation where He becomes so accessible to us. And really, if a person becomes mahroom from experiencing Allah, right, in the haram, that's a great mahrumiyat. And the Prophet ﷺ also said that alternate between Hajj and Umrah because it removes poverty and sin, just like the forge removes impurities from iron, gold, and silver. And that riwayah is in Tirmidhi. So now the question comes, how do you prepare to go for how do you prepare for Umrah. So one of the things that we have to understand in the deen for when it comes to many of the ibadat, the one of the ways to optimize um, taking benefit from that ibadah requires preparation ahead of time, right? One of the mistakes that many people make is that they, when it comes to ibadah, they just come and show up and expect that they're going to get benefit. And while there is some benefit in that, there's not benefit in the same way as if you had prepared it ahead of time. Let me give you an example of Ramadan. So in Ramadan, a person, usually people don't necessarily prepare ahead of Ramadan, right? In Sha'ban and keeping the fast of Sha'ban and getting in the Ramadan mode. And so what happens is Ramadan hits and it takes some time and people start getting into gear. And by the time they're in, they shift their gears and their sixth gear is Laylatul Qadr and Ramadan's wrapping up. And you're like, oh my God, the Ramadan's over. It was so short. How could I have, I wish I could have taken more benefit. Well, if you wanted to have taken benefit, you should have done what the Sahaba did. They used to feel 6 months of remorse after Ramadan passed. And after that, then they would spend 6 months looking forward to Ramadan, meaning their heart was attached and hung on Ramadan. The same thing is for Salah. The person who muntaziru Salah ka'annahu fi Salah, the person who's waiting for prayer is as if they're in prayer. And so for the person whose heart is always in there, the preparation for prayer doesn't start at Takbir al-Tahrima, Allahu Akbar. If you're going to do that, you're already gone. The idea is that you come early for the prayer. You come for you make the preparation for prayer actually starts at the time of wudu. And that's why one of the righteous predecessors, the Salaf, he was making wudu and his face would turn white. And they would ask him, why is your face turning white? And he said, do you have any idea who I'm going to stand in front of? This was not before the salat, this was during the wudu, right? So there's this idea of preparation. So in the same way, if a person is going for Umrah, you want to try to prepare ahead of time. And what that means is a couple of things. Number one is that, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, indeed actions. I'm speaking fast because I'm trying to, there's a lot to cover and I'm trying to make up some time. So, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, indeed actions are by their intention. And so what that means is that we want to try to make as pure of an intention as possible. There's going to come a time where people will go to the haram because it's going to be like a vacation. And for some people, that time is, that time is really now, right? People go because, they have these lavish, buffets and beautiful hotels, and you don't even go to the haram to pray. They just pray in the, what's that called, in the hotel, right? Imagine you come halfway across the world, right, to come and visit Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that person's so mahroom that they can't take a couple of steps to go to the haram, to go from the hotel to enter into the haram, right? That is, there's a certain degree of despondency there. Let me just get rid of these. Khair. I don't know why. Why it doesn't. Oh, it's through that. I think it'd be distracting. Thank you. Huh? Okay. I'll try to speak up. So, there was a story of a person who was going with he was a servant and he was going with his master. And he was going with his master and time came for Salah and they had to stop for Salah. So the servant goes into the masjid and to pray. And the guy who was his master, he wasn't very religious. He said, okay, fine. If you have to go and pray, I'll wait for you. I'll just wait outside. So he's waiting and waiting and waiting. 10 minutes go by, 20 minutes goes by. He's just like, what is happening with this guy? What's he doing in there? Is he building a masjid? So eventually he got really frustrated. So he said that he didn't have the tawfiq to even step in the masjid to see what's going on, right? Our teacher would say that the musalla throws you off. Some people can't even, it won't sustain such sinners. And so this person, he shouted from outside. He says, what's taking so long? And he said, the same being who doesn't allow you to come in will not allow me to leave. Right? He was so connected with the haram, with the masjid, he was not allowed to. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept him there in ibadah. And so in the same way, when people go to the haram, right? We don't want to fall under that situation where we're just going there because, oh, you get nice jilbabs, and like, oh, there's also good jewelry shopping, or I'm gonna get good selfies to put up on my Instagram account, and everything is gonna be so cool. And you already have it built out in the back of your mind how you're gonna making dua and which angle of yours is gonna be the best and how it's gonna look when it's up on TikTok, right? If all of those are tainted intentions from the start, the reason that a person will be going for Umrah is number one, seeking Allah. We already talked that. We're going for Allah. He is our murad. He is our goal. He is our objective. He's our love. We're going for forgiveness. We want to have a clean slate and start again. And we want to achieve self-rectification. This is really, what happens is when a person has a car, or it just happened to my car yesterday. We were just driving, and we stopped wherever at our destination, and I went and checked out at the car, and the gas lid had just flown off, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. How did that happen? And so now I have to take the car, and then the starter's not working. So now, okay, I need to take the car in. So the car doesn't work. You take the car in. But I got into a close call, almost a car accident, like about a month or two ago. You take it into the collision center, they try to fix it. But if the damage is so bad sometimes, right? So bad that the insurance company will look at the car and they say, look, how much damage there's on the car. It would cost more to fix the car than just to call and pay for a new car. So they call it a total, right? They say car's totaled, just get rid of the car. What happens with the Umrah is that and there's no shop that's going to go and fix it. This happened after Milton, right? I took my Tesla in, like, I mean, it's like a graveyard of for cyber trucks, right? So if you're thinking of getting a cyber truck, just, I mean, think twice. But beyond that, they're like people came in where their cars flooded, and this, that, and the other, and they had so many different things. So, but there's certain things, certain level of damage where the technician is just not going to touch it. It's like it's over. The amazing thing about the Umrah is you can bring in your life totaled. You can bring in your heart totaled. You can bring in your amal totaled, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you He will rectify it as if it was the day that you bought the car, right? It's a fresh, new, يوم ولدته أمه, the day that your mother bore you, right? When it comes to Hajj, and that's the message there, that you can have a brand new beginning. So we start with the niyyah. You want to try to repent from all your sins, and the other thing is to try to build up spiritual stamina ahead of time, right? If a person is not used to reading Quran and it's hard to read one-fourth of a juz, then when you get there, you're going to want to read Quran. Maybe you'll have a lot of spiritual energy. There'll be a lot of nur there. There'll be all of this, impetus, but you're going to max out very quickly, right? And so what will happen is then you're going to start building up stamina while you're there for the 6 days, 7 days, 8 days you're there, and then you're leaving. When you're leaving, you could read a juz, and then you look back. I wish I could have read a juz a day. I wish I could have read 3 juz a day. I wish I could have read a Quran a day. Sometimes people think these things are fantastical. Or who can read a Quran a day? It's possible, right? And in fact, some people read it between the time of Asr to Maghrib. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something called Tayyu Zaman. Allah puts barakah. Let's put it this way, like that even the time can be wrapped up for people when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves to listen to their Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it possible, right? But the idea is that we get into the habit of zikr, the habit of Quran, the habit of longer salah, the habit of tahajjud, so on and so forth before we go. And the last thing is that we want to rectify our dues before we go, right? Allahu tayyibu la yaqbulu illa tayyib. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is good and He doesn't accept that which is good. So as much as possible, we want to um, again set things straight, and set things straight between us and Allah, and us and the creation of Allah. So between us and Allah, if we have salah that are due, we should try to make up those salah. If we have fasts that are due, we should try to make up those fasts. If we have trusts of other people that they had given us, then we should try to return those trusts. If we had oaths that we had made, we should try to fulfill those oaths. If there's zakat that's pending, we should try to pay out those zakat. And if we had wronged anyone else, this is the time to go and say sorry and clean that slate, because that will become an anchor. That will become an anchor from a person being able to benefit. And, this is a place where, matters can become very, very sensitive, right? I remember, so I'll just give you one personal example it just occurred to me. It was very fresh in my mind. Um, I remember going to the haram, and usually when I enter the haram, you enter the haram, you feel the nur, right? This is the nur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends on the haram in the world, and from there it actually spreads to the other masajid. That's why you feel the peace that you feel when you enter into a masajid. It's a reflection of what is going on in the haram. And so I had entered the masjid and I just felt something was spiritually off. And I'm thinking, what sin did I do? And I'm like, I couldn't think of anything. I'm racking my brain, racking my brain, racking my brain. And then I realized there was one medical bill, right? You know how they send you a medical bill, and I was like, okay, I'll just pay it when I pay it. And it comes in hadith, matalul ghani zulmun, that the delay of a person who has wealth is considered zulm. So even that, right? Fine, it might be, I don't know, Etna, but at the end of the day, it was their haqq. And I went back to the hotel, I paid the bill, and whatever had to opened up after that, right? So it's just one very simple example of how we want to set our affairs straight with other human beings before we go. If that means say sorry, that means say sorry. Okay. If it means say sorry, say sorry. If it means that there needs to be restitution of some type of dues, then we should restitute those dues, so on and so forth. Okay. Yeah, we can approximate the. Then before we leave home, make 2 rak'ah before we leave home. When you get close to the door, you can read Suratul Qadr. And then when you leave and are outside the house, read Ayatul Kursi and give some charity. And make the dua of safar, right? And this is a longer dua, and like just doing a commentary on this would probably take the whole hour. So we're gonna just know that it gives us advice about this journey particularly, but any journey that a person takes. That on that journey, a person wants to be careful about ever doing wrong to anyone else. The reason that you take the journey is to seek piety and righteousness, and that you ask for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make the journey easy. So khair, now we're going to transition into the fiqh of it, and then we'll talk about what's that called, some of the spiritual aspects before we close. So when it comes to Umrah, there's only basically 3 simple ingredients, right? There's just 3 parts to make the Umrah happen. Number 1, you need ihram. Number 2, you need to make tawaf. And number 3, you need to make sa'i, right? If you can do these 3 things, the Umrah will happen. Now there's details under each one of these things. So the first thing is ihram. Ihram is a state. It refers to the 2 cloths that you put on. We call those ihram, but it also refers to the spiritual state that a person enters when they're required to enter when they're intending Makkah. And so a person needs to be in a state of ihram before they pass the miqat. And so I have a diagram here on the right, and what you'll see is that there's 2 circles, right? Well, so you have this Masjid al-Haram in the inside, and there's certain rules which apply to Masjid al-Haram, but they're outside the scope of ihram, so we're not going to talk about that. Then you have certain milestones or standpoints which are marked around in the Makkah area, and this is another sort of boundary. And then outside that, there's other milestones or mileposts that are set up. And these outer posts, that circle that they make, this is called the miqat, right? So the people who live outside of this circle, they're called ahlul afaq. The people who live inside this circle in this gray area, they're called ahlul hil. And the people who live inside here are called ahlul haram. And there's different rulings that apply to each one of them. But what we just need to keep in mind is that when we come from the outside and are entering or passing any one of these miqat, if you're intending Makkah, right? Again, the thing is that you're intending Makkah. If you're coming into Jeddah and you're going to go to Medina, you have no intention to go into Makkah, you don't have to enter into ihram. But if you're trying to go to Makkah, whether it's for business, whether it's for pleasure, whether it's to visit relatives, or whether it's for Umrah, you have to have ihram before you pass this first boundary, right? And then we'll talk about how to enter into that. If a person doesn't have ihram when they pass that first boundary, then there'll be a penalty, and that's called dam, right? And we'll talk about what that is. This actually happened to me one time. So what happens is, like, you're Ahlul Afaq, you make your Umrah, and after you make your Umrah, and then you become you're considered Ahlul Haram. That's why if you want to make a second Umrah, you don't have to go all the way out again. You can just go to this first circle, anywhere in this first circle, and you can assume Ihram again, and you can make another Umrah. Masjid Aisha is in this first circle, for example. So most people, that's where they go. They go to Masjid Aisha, they make an Ihram again, and then they come back and make their thing. So what had happened is that we were, uh, what's it called? We're in Mecca, then we went to Medina, and we're coming back to Mecca, and I was on the train, and we're on the train, and we left Medina, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do my talbiyah, and I fell asleep. And when I fell asleep, I had passed by the time I got up, I got up and we were already past the miqat, right? So I passed the miqat without making the talbiyah. So I wasn't in ihram, so I had to give a dab, right? So that's the idea. And a woman, even if she's on her period, she will also enter into ihram. So this ruling applies to both men and to women. Okay, how do you get into ihram? If you can make a ghusl, you should make ghusl. If you can't make ghusl, then make wudu, right? So it sort of depends where you're coming in from. If you're coming in, if you're gonna, if you're have a layover in Jordan, it might be difficult to make ghusl, but you can make wudu, right? But if you're, for example, had a really long layover in Turkey and you're at a hotel, you can make ghusl at your hotel, make ghusl at your hotel. Because usually when you go from here, there's usually one stop before you actually get into Jeddah. So make wudu or ghusl. You can cut, the armpit hair or the private hairs ahead of time. Trim the mustache. A person can put on some scent and deodorant ahead of time. And a man will put on two unstitched white cloths for men. And women don't wear, obviously, white cloths. They can wear any modest, loose clothing, even if it's stitched, and they'll have their hijab or niqab. And then a person will try to keep in mind that they want to change their footwear. So this is a mistake that sometimes people make. One of the things in ihram is that you have the upper portion, the raised bone of the foot has to remain exposed, right? So some people, they just wear sneakers and they think that's okay. But then that's where your laces are. That area has to be exposed. So basically what you need to practically wear is flip-flops, right? So you want to get a pair of flip-flops and change into your flip-flops ahead of time. Then a person will read 2 rakat nafil. You read Suratul Kafirun. This is not necessary, but this is the sunnah. You can read Suratul Kafirun in the first rakat and Suratul Ikhlas in the second rakat. And for the men, if you have your ihram, you can put the ihram over your head to cover your head when you're praying. And then you make the intention, right? The intention is, this is one intention you can use, but that you make an intention that I'm going to be entering in, what you're going to be doing. And that's Allahumma inni uridu al-umrah fayassirha li wa taqabbalha minni. Allah, I'm intending to do umrah, so make it easy for me and accept it from me. So a couple of things here that come up with this particular dua that I think that point to a larger motif within the deen. And that is that when you do an ibadah, we make a niyyah, right? That's really what's up to us. We start, the niyyah is in our hands, right? And this is sort of anything in life. You make a niyyah, the actual happening of the ibadah is not going to happen from our efforts. It only happens from the fadl and the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? وَمَا تَوْفِيقِ, even Shu'aib alayhi salam, he said, وَمَا تَوْفِيقِ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. We cannot pray a single prayer if it's not for the will of Allah. We cannot make a single dhikr if it's not for the fadl of Allah. We cannot read a single ayah of the Quran if it's not for the fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We just make the intention and then we ask, Ya Allah, yassir ali, make it easy for us, right? You give us the tawfiq. You give us that strength. You give us the energy. You inspire our hearts with the words that we can say that will please you. And then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you that, that's one of the secrets for qubuliyah. When you approach your actions with humility, right? That it's not me. I didn't do the Umrah. I didn't do the Hajj. I didn't pray 30 raka'ah of nafil. It's you, Allah. You gave me the tawfiq. That's when qubuliyah, right? And then you see all three aspects in this dua. your irada, which is your niyyah, yassirha li, the tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then the last part, the qubuliyah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then after that, then we recite the talbiyah. We say, labbaik, Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika laka labbaik, inna alhamda wa ni'mata laka wal mulk la sharika lak. Right? And when a person will read this, and you can, when a person reads this, then they actually enter into the state of ihram. So for example, you just read your 2 rak'ah nafil. Do you enter into ihram? No. You made the intention. Do you enter ihram? No. You still have to do those things. But you wore the 2 cloths. Do you enter into ihram? No. When you read this, then all the things that you cannot do will become now sacrosanct and prohibited on the individual. So the ihram starts when a person reads this. And this is what needs to be read before a person passes the miqat. Like when I was coming from Medina, I had the thing, I had my ihram on, I had made niyyah, I had everything. I just had to recite the words, but I forgot to recite the word, past the miqat. So this is what you're doing before. So when a person reads this, then while they're going to be in ihram, you want to keep on reciting the talbiyah as much as possible. One formula, and if you can't do it all the time, then try to at least do it when you change your scenario, getting onto a bus, getting off of a bus, going from up to down, going from down to up, particularly up for down. That one is specified and emphasized when you're going lying down onto a bed, when you're getting up from your bed, when you're going from one room to another room, when you're moving into the masjid. Anytime you're changing your situation, you should use that as a prompt to keep on renewing your talbiyah. Men will say it loudly, and women will say it softly. And there's a lot of, I'm going to talk about at the end, one of the ways that you make your Umrah spiritual will be from doing something called tafakkur. Right? And that you have to actually contemplate. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَى قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Don't you contemplate on the Quran? Are you just automatons going on through your life and just read through it like as if it's just some words? Like use your mind. أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ أَفَلَا يَعْقِلُونَ. Don't you think? أَفَلَا يَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. This idea of contemplation, activating the mind to think about what's actually going on, brings you into the moment, right? You're present, and it transforms it to becoming very spiritual. For example, I'll give you 2 examples of how to understand this. You can understand the talbiyah in one way is by a person as words or profession of love, right? This is your love poetry to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? When you're saying, labbaik, Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika laka labbaik, inna alhamda wa ni'mata laka wal mulk. Like for example, if someone's very beautiful, you say, oh, you have such nice hair, you have such nice clothes, or you smell so nice, you have such beautiful eyes. You're going to praise them and say nice things about them, right? So that's what we're saying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we're saying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the ultimate degree, infinite degree of anything. Inna alhamda, right? And there's, there's some linguistic nuances here, which is beyond the scope of the talk, because when you put that al, it can give ahde jins, it can give istighraq, it can do all these other things. So it means like every single word of praise that was ever said to any person, anything that Romeo said to Juliet, anything that any poet said to their beloved, all of those things are still small from what is supposed to be said to you. Every single word of praise is for you, right? Every ni'mah is for you, Allah. The entire universe is for you, right? The other way, so when you keep on saying this as a profession of love, and find different dimensions and different words of how it's expressing your love. That's one way to think about it. Another way to take this to a spiritual level is to show devotion and abdiyah, right? When you say labbaik, Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika laka labbaik, you see, like a cadet stands up and says, yes, sir, right? Hazir, right? When you're taking the roll call, Omar, yes, present. Whatever you say, Allah, any commandment you will say, whether it's for me to lift the world or for me to just sit in the corner in some masjid somewhere, it doesn't matter. Labbaik. I am your servant. I am fully, completely, utterly devoted to whatever commandment you say to me. Labbaik, Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika labbaik. And the reason I'm labbaik is because la sharika lak, there's no one like you. There's no one that exists in the entire universe like you. So who else am I going to say labbaik to except for you? Right? So this is some way like where we can interact with this. Another way that some of the ulama have said about doing this is to say labbaik 3 times. When you say it, say it 3 times, then follow it with durood, and then make a dua. And one of the duas you can say is Allahumma inni as'aluka ridaka wal jannah wa a'udhu bika min sakhatika wan nar. Khair. Anyway, so how did you get into ihram? You put on the 2 cloths, you pray 2 rak'ah nafil, you made the niyyah, and you said talbiyah. Now you're in ihram. When you enter into ihram, there's certain things that you can do and certain things that you cannot do. Let's talk about the things that you cannot do. You cannot have any type of romantic interactions, right? There's no kissing, there's no embracing. That all of that is what's that called? Close. فلا رفس ولا فسوق ولا جدال في الحج, right? You can't cover the skin of the face. So for sisters who wear niqab, that's why they have the visor and it comes across and it's further away. And even in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, like Ummahatul Mu'mineen, they would cover their, they would, if they uncovered their face when there was no one around, but when men would come closer, then they would cover their face, but then they would have a visor so that it didn't touch their face. So same thing with guys, there's like, you can't, wrap, we don't typically wrap anything, across the face, but also no covering of the head, right? So that's sometimes where sometimes people make a mistake. There's no wearing of stitched clothing, which means no underwear, no socks, no head coverings, all of the stitched clothing. The only thing that you're wearing are your 2 pieces of cloth, right? And if people want some help, I can tell, we can, afterwards, we can talk about how to tie the ihram properly so that a person can cover themselves and it doesn't become undone. That's also an art, right? Because you should be careful about that. And when you can do that, it's much easier to do your ibadah, right? Because at least you're far from that thing. So if you don't know also, Mufti Abdul Rahman also has a demonstration online. You can check that one as well, where he demonstrates a nice way to tie the ihram. Um, Otherwise, the thing is like then people don't do even their top right, and then they're flap, they're like, throwing it always over their shoulder. Then it comes and hits some other muhrim who's in ihram, and you've covered their face, right? You're like, oh, I just took a hit, right? Because you're not supposed to cover the face. There's no fighting and arguing. There's no applying of fragrance, right, to the body or ihram. So there's 2 things here. Like people are not usually going to pick up their Armani and spray it on themselves when they're ihram. That's not what happens. Usually where people mess up is they're used to washing their hands with soap. And the soaps are usually scented, right? So they go to the bathroom, they're in ihram, in their hotel, they pick up the soap, and then they're in the airport and they put the pump on and they put this soap on their thing and it's scented and now their whole hand has become scented, even if they wash it off. So that's problematic. So be careful about that. The second thing to be careful about is that the Kaaba is oftentimes fragrance, right? Especially Astarul Kaaba, the cloth of the Kaaba. So people are in such a desire. I don't know if it depends on busy is when you go, but people are so what's that called? Covetous of trying to touch the Kaaba that even during the Ihram they touch the Kaaba and then now you have scent all over your hand. So yeah, a person should be very careful about those 2 things. There's no clipping the nails or removing hairs from any part of the body, and there's no hunting or assisting. There's some other rules for the haram. For example, you can't cut the grass. You cannot cut any trees, so on and so forth. So a person should be careful. There's uh, the whole section on the penalty for the violations. I'm just going to give you the 10,000-foot view, okay? And then you can look into the booklets for the particular thing about what you need to do when you have the violation. There's going to be 2 broad categories of penalties for a violation that occurs. One category is sadaqah, right? And that sadaqah can be at 3 levels. It's either going to be sadaqatul fitr, right? When you have Eid al-Fitr, we give sadaqatul fitr. This is equal to 2.2 kg of wheat. So whatever the value of that is, you would give that much in sadaqatul fitr. This sadaqah can be given anywhere, right? It can even be given when you come home. It doesn't have to happen in the haram. There's also something called kuch sadaqah, right? Or a little bit of sadaqah. It doesn't reach the matter at the level of sadaqatul fitr. And this is for those type of penalties which are very, very, very minor, right? It doesn't really reach the level of a full penalty. For example, you're making wudu. And when you make wudu, 1 or 2 hairs of your beard come off. remember, when it comes to these violations, the violations apply whether or not you meant it, or whether they were done by accident, or whether they were done purposefully. If you did it purposefully, then you're sinful. If you did it by accident, رُفِعَ عَنْ هَذِهِ الْأُمَّةِ الْخَطَأُ وَالنِّسْيَانُ. If you did it by accident or by mistake, you might not be sinful, but you're still liable for the penalty, right? So, for example, or like I gave you the example, the person who's in front of you, he flips his ihram and his ihram covers your face. So then you give, 1, 2 riyals, something small, just to sort of, clean yourself up from those small things. And it's just a general good idea to give some sadaqah after you do your umrah, just to cover any small, lagzisha or any small oversights that had occurred. And then there's this thing of sadaqah of equivalence. It doesn't really matter because no one's cutting down trees or mowing grass in the haram. Then there's a thing called dam. There's a badana that doesn't apply. That's a large animal, and dam is usually the one that people fear. So dam is when you have to sacrifice a sheep or a goat or give the value of 1/7 of a large animal. This is going to be about 150 to $200, right? Just to give you an idea. So, and this can only be given in the haram. So if you make a major violation, with the scent, something like that, covering the face, then in that situation, what's that called? A dam is necessary, and then there's offices there. Like if you go into the Zamzam Towers, there'll be like these booths, and you can go and tell them that I have to give a violation, and you can make a payment. You can use your credit card, and they will arrange for the sacrifice to be done in the precincts of the haram. How much of a penalty you will have to get depends on the violation and the extent, right? So sometimes if you covered your face, but it wasn't for long enough, or if you had some scent, but it didn't cover a full limb, it was only 1/4. So there's all these rules, and you can refer to your muallim or more detailed books to understand what the exact penalty will be. And then we already talked about the other points. Okay, what can you do? So you can use an umbrella or you can take shade. That doesn't count as covering your head. Okay, I've seen there's some people of a certain what's that called version of Islam. In their buses, they don't have their buses are like open, they're convertibles, right? So they take off the roof because they say, oh, you can't cover your head. So you don't have to do that, right? You can sit in a bus, you can sit in a taxi, you can use an umbrella to guard yourself from the sun. You can wear rings, you can wear glasses. So wearing glasses is not considered covering your head. Hearing aids, a watch, or a money belt. So this is also important. Sometimes people are worried about tying their ihram. So or where they're going to carry their phone, or their sometimes they have like some money with them. So what they'll do is you can just get these money belts, and you can wear a money belt, and that's not considered wearing stitched clothes. You can wear a backpack. You can change your ihram clothing. So if you have an ihram, it gets dirty, it's hard to wash it there. You can buy another ihram there. It's very reasonably priced. You can probably get it for like $20 or so. And then you can change into a new ihram if the previous ihram becomes najas or something like that. And for sisters, they can also change their ihram. So they can, for example, if they were wearing a jilbab, they can put on a new jilbab, but they have to be very careful. Remember the first time before you entered into ihram, you could put scent on because you are not in ihram yet. So you can put on some scent, you can put on some deodorant because it might be a while before you're going to be able to use scent. Now, once you enter ihram, can you use scent? No. So if they had washed for example, their clothes in the washer at home with Downy, spring scent and this and that, has all this fragrance in it. Now can they put on that jilbab or no? No, they can't put on that jilbab. They have to put on a jilbab which was washed with fragrance-free, soap, and so it can have no fragrance now because now they're in ihram. You can cover your body with a blanket or a sleeping bag, but you should keep your face and head uncovered. You can use a pillow. So sometimes people get very, neurotic, and they say, okay, I'm putting my head on the pillow. The pillow is covering my face. Now I have to give dump. No, it doesn't work like that. You can use a pillow. Covering the face with a tissue, using a hand sanitizer if it's fragrance free. So the chemical scent is not considered an actual scent. It's actually fragrance. Another time, sometimes people freak out is they get biryani, right? So they go to the Pakistani restaurant right there in Jabal Omar. They go up there and he put, it smells so nice. They say, oh my God, now I have fragrance all over my hands. I have to give 1,000 dams. So that's not considered fragrance, right? I mean, unless they actually put, there are some, Indian foods that they actually add like rose fragrance and something like that in. But if you're eating regular food, it has a natural scent to it. The rice has a natural scent. The spice has a natural scent. That's not considered fragrance. Fragrance is actually fragrance. And if your wudu breaks or your ghusl is lost, then your ihram still stays intact. It doesn't become broken. Okay, now we'll talk about, and so now you're in ihram. What's going to happen is, you're going to get into your, what most likely scenario is that you're going to have a stop before you actually get into Jeddah. So before you get into Jeddah, you want to put on your ihram. You can get on the plane. You've changed your shoes. So which also means that, you're going to leave, for example, say you're leaving from Tampa, wherever you're leaving from, you're going to wear regular clothes. You're not going to put on your ihram there. Do not put your ihram in your checked-in baggage. You're going to be in trouble, right? Keep it in your carry-on, right? Keep it on your either personal item. Otherwise, if it's in the checked item, you're only going to get it in Jeddah and you're stuck. You can't change it. So you have to keep it in your thing so that usually wherever you stop, right? Whether it's Turkey or Dubai or where, in the bathrooms there, then you can change into an ihram, right? You can make the wudu if you need to make the wudu, and you can offer the 2 rakat there, right? And you can make the niyyah when you get on the plane or at any time. And then when you get closer, you can either make the talbiyah then, or if you want to wait until you're getting closer to the miqat, then you can make, but it's usually like 2 hour flight or something. So you just make the talbiyah and enter into ihram there. So after you get into there, you're going to arrive in Jeddah. From Jeddah, you end up taking a taxi. The taxi will take you to Makkah. It takes about an hour, hour and a half, depending on traffic. If there's a lot of traffic, it can even take 2 hours, right? So depending on which roads are open and closed. So then you get into Makkah, you get to your hotel. And when you get to your hotel, you'll probably go, you get in, freshen up, so on and so forth, maybe have something to eat. And I would say that when you get to the hotel, give yourself some time to freshen up. Don't be like, oh, I'm in this thing. I feel so uncomfortable at ihram. I just need to get out of it. Let me just go and rush and do my umrah. You want to go and make the umrah when you're in, equanimity, you're calm, you're fresh, you've eaten, you have nothing else on your mind, right? And a nice time that we personally have found to do this is like, when you get in around 11, 12 o'clock when you go in the night is usually cool. There's usually not that much rush. It's much easier to get it done in a very nice way. You end up finishing around tahajjud time. You can pray tahajjud, you make your fajr, you cut your hair later, and then you can come to the hotel and take some rest. So, it sort of lines up very nicely. But again, it will be different for different people. So you go to the hotel. Now you're going to leave your hotel. You're going to start approaching Masjid al-Haram. And so what happens is the Kaaba is in the middle. There's a sahan, or there's a courtyard, right? That's on the level of the Kaaba. That's called the mataf, right? And technically the other areas are also mataf, but we often refer to that as the mataf, which is immediately the area surrounding next to the Kaaba. And then there's the masjid, which is like a circular building. It's not exactly circular now, right? There's extensions, but you can see a circular building that has 3 floors around it. So you're going to enter the masjid before you're going to get into the mataf, right? And oftentimes when you enter nowadays, the way, I went back in November, you're going to enter on floor 1. You'll actually have to take an escalator down to get into the mataf, right? So you're going to enter into the masjid first, enter into the masjid with your right foot, right? So the other thing to do is also, you can keep these string draw bags with you. You can keep and you can put your shoes in there, right? Because what happens if you put your shoes somewhere outside, then there's no guarantee you're going to find them again, right? So you can just keep them on you. So you keep your shoe, take off your shoes, enter with your right foot, pray 2 rakah when you enter, make the dua of entering into a masjid, Allahumma aftah li abwaba rahmatik, send salawat on the Prophet. This is something that you do anytime you enter the masjid, but particularly you keep these adab when you're entering Masjid al-Haram, and then you make the intention for nafil etikaf, right? Then enter into the masjid with full of humility, full of respect, full of longing, the way that you would enter into the court of a king, right? But also the way that you, with the same type of shauq that you would have for someone who you love so much, and you're seeing them after a long time. Might be a kid, might be your wife, might be a long lost brother. The fact that they have gone so far again, and the butterflies that you'd have in your stomach right? And all the anticipation, bring those feelings as if you're coming to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فمن كان يرجو لقاء ربه فليعمل عملا صالحا ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا أنا عند ظن عبدي بي. If you are looking forward to meeting with Allah, then inshallah Allah will also look forward to meeting with you. Then you want to proceed to the mataf. Keep your eyes down because the first time that you look at the Kaaba, that it's an accepted dua. Right? It's one of the times where you have a dua that's mustajab. And so you want to keep your eyes down and then go to an area off to the side when you do look up and you see the Kaaba for the first time, that you're not crowded, you're not going to be shushed away, and you can actually make dua for a long time. And it's really that first glance, right? Before you make the first blink. So think ahead of time what your first dua is going to be, right? Imam Hanifa used to make the dua that, Ya Allah, make all my duas accepted, right? So it's a very smart dua because now that glance is only this long, but then, now you can have all your duas accepted, inshallah. Allahumma ja'alna min mustajab ad-da'wat. So, and then what after that, you proceed to the mataf, you find a place, you make your first dua. And then you've been making talbiyah to this point. Now, when you're going to begin your tawaf, that's when the talbiyah is going to end, right? So up to now, um, we've been talking about ihram, right? So summary for ihram: put on the two sheets, make niyyah, what's that called? Recite the talbiyah. Be careful about the things that you cannot do, and keep on making talbiyah until you enter into the masjid. Now we're going to tawaf. Tawaf involves circling the Kaaba 7 times, right? One tawaf, each round is considered a shout. So 7 shouts equals 1 tawaf, right? This is something Muhammad Tarek Jamil was, he was in the haram, and there was this one person. Sometimes people come from small towns, and then he was, making tawaf, and he asked him, "Oh, how many do you have left?" He said, "Oh, mera abhi khatam hone aa raha, like I'm about to finish mine." He says, "Oh, that's really great. Yours is finishing. When is mine going to finish? I've been here since Fajr." He was going, I don't know, he was probably on number 300, 400. People don't know the rules, so they just keep on going. They just come with shauq, they come with love. So, and sometimes people ask this, right? It's like, is 7 times equal to 1 shout, and then you have to do 7 of those, so it becomes 49. So people sometimes get confused. No, it's just 7 rounds. And tawaf is of 2 types, right? You have the necessary tawaf, which is the one that you're going to do in the Umrah, but there's also something called nafil tawaf. Just like you can read nafil salah, you can make nafil tawaf. So what you can do when you're doing your this is something that people will do when what do you do after you're done with Umrah? Just do tawafs, right? Just do tawafs the whole day. And those will be nafil. And we'll talk about how, but they're done this very similarly. Tawaf requires wudu, right? So keep this in mind. It's just, in a way, it's just like prayer, right? So you want to be in a state of wudu. And tawaf begins at the black stone, right? So there will be the black stone, and then across the way there's a green light, and there's an imaginary line. That's where the tawaf will begin. And tawaf requires a niyyah. You can't just make circles and make rounds without a niyyah. So you make this a niyyah, and it's the same pattern. Remember we talked about intention, tawfiq, قبولية اللهم إني أريد الطواف بيتك الحرام فيسره لي وتقبله مني. Then, so let's just get into the particulars. How do you actually do tawaf, right? You come into this, can you see this cursor, right? So you're going to come into the haram, in the Masjid al-Haram. You're going to come, what's it called? The door of the Kaaba is right here. This is the green light, right? This is the black stone over here. So you're going to come in, and people are making circumambulating this way, right? They're going counterclockwise. So you're going to come in, you're going to start moving this way, and then when you come a little bit before, right, the line, right, that's when you're going to turn your chest towards the Kaaba, and you're basically going to make takbir, right? You make takbir as you would do in salah. Bismillahi, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, walillahi alhamd. Right? This is just like how you would do, and in the same way that when you make salah and you say Allahu Akbar, you put the dunya on the back of your hands and throw it behind. Do the same thing when you're doing tawaf. Forget about all your bills, forget about your boss, forget about work, forget about the house, just throw everything behind you. Right? Because now this is where you're going to focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then after doing that, then you're going to do something called istilam, right? So you move over until you get to the line. Now you're on this line. Then normally what you would have done is, if it wasn't a rush, you would try to kiss the black stone, right? But you can't kiss the black stone. There's too much rush. So what you will do is that you will basically make an ishara from far away, right? So for example, if say this was the black stone, I'm all the way back there. I just make my hand like that, Bismillahi, Allahu Akbar, and kiss my hand. Right? That's called the istilam. The Prophet ﷺ, when he was on his riding beast, he did it with a stone, with a staff, and then he kissed the staff. We can just do it by ishara from far away. Now, when you're going around, don't be very careful that you keep in the direction of the movement of circumambulation, and you don't turn your chest towards the Kaaba. Like when you're praying, which way do you have to pray? You have to face the Qibla. If you move away from the Qibla, what happens? You break your salah, right? Similarly, if you're making tawaf, you cannot face directly the Kaaba. If at some point you become facing the Kaaba, then you have to redo that portion. So take a couple steps back and keep on going. And for the men, for any tawaf, after which there's going to be a sa'i, which is basically the umrah, there's going to be two things that you're going to do are special. One is called ittiba, which is an exposing your right shoulder. So you take the ihram, put it underneath your right armpit, and put it over your left shoulder. So the right shoulder is, and this is going to be for all 7 rounds. After you're done with the 7 rounds, then you can cover your shoulder again. Okay? And then the other thing that you'll do is you'll do something called ramal, which is for the first 3 rounds, you walk with a little bit of vigor, right? Small steps, little quick steps, strutting with the shoulders. And there's a background to this, but we don't have the time. What do you do when you're going around the Kaaba? What do you do in tawaf? Right? So you can do dhikr, you can read du'as, you can read Quran. But there's a couple of things that I will say, some advice, very short advices that I will say. One short advice is that some people take their dua books and they read the books, right? And you can do that. Sometimes you'll have a group leader, he'll say, Allahumma, everyone says, Allahumma, right? It's also part of the ronakh of being in that place. You can't get those things out of your mind. But our teacher, he said it one time very beautifully. He said, if you want, instead of reading the duas in the book, read the duas in your heart. So whatever you feel, right? Whatever hurts you, wherever the pain is, that's what you want to talk about, right? This is a time where you're just talking to Allah. So this is, if someone told you, in the old days, it was very hard to call long distance, right? For long distance, you had to go to a place, you give them the money, they would put the thing, you get like 3-4 minutes, right? And the connection was thing, and you only had a few minutes to say something that to your faraway relatives, right? Imagine, right? And even now on Verizon, believe me, I know, right? If you you didn't remember to turn your roaming off, and you accidentally call home, you come home and you find $1,000 bill, right? Imagine someone tells you no roaming charges, free connection, crystal line, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 1 hour, just talk to them. Straight connection, free. That's what this is. Just speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Say what's on your mind. And one of the things that helps is to plan ahead, right? So if you just get on the moment, sometimes you just don't know what to say. So you think ahead of time. And one of the things, like, maybe it's the scientist in me, but I think there's 7 shouts. So I make like 7 topics. And each shout, I try to do 1 topic. So one shout will be for the Ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. One shout will be for my family. One shout will be for spiritual rectification. One shout will be for akhirah. One shout will be for like you just sort of divide it that way. One shout will be for your relationship with Allah. One shout will be for forgiveness. So when you do that, now it's very easy, right, to know what to think about when you're going. I would say that be very careful, right? This is not the time to take pictures, right? This is not the time to turn on the FaceTime, right? In fact, if a person can somehow leave their phones behind, this is the time to do it, right? Because you don't need any network, any connection other than the connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, one of the advice I'll give at the end, I'm just going to point out an example of this, is if you want to make the Umrah more spiritual, look for symbolism. So for example, why do you do it clockwise versus counterclockwise, right? Why do you do it counterclockwise? Well, when you do it counterclockwise, your heart is actually closer to the Kaaba if you were to do it than if you were to do it the other way, right? It shows your love and closeness towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? It's a show of affection. Why do you go around, right? So it's one way to understand that is that you're telling Allah that my entire life revolves around you, Allah. And when I go back, my entire life is going to revolve you. What the decisions I'm going to make, the things I'm going to do, the time and efforts I'm going to make, everything has to revolve around Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's sort of one of the secrets of making the tawaf, right? I mean, each one of these things has deeper layers. I mean, we don't have time to go into all the symbolism, but it gives you an idea. So you're going to go around. When you're going around, you can't basically do it anyway, but be careful that, if you, in some hypothetical world, somehow you're able to get into this hatim area, which is where this semicircle is, that's actually considered inside the Kaaba, right? So that wouldn't have counted. So you have to go around that. They do open it sometimes. So in other circumstances where you're not doing tawaf, it's nice to be able to get into that. We'll talk about that. And then when you come around, then you come to this corner, this Yemeni corner, there's no kissing or istilam here, right? But from here to here, this is where sunnah to read Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana wa qina adhab an-nar, right? This is the dua to read from there. So now you're going to go around, right? When you finish 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you do istilam. Total of 8 istilams, right? Every time you go around and finish one, you turn towards the Kaaba, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, kiss, and then you do your next shout. And then you come another istilam from far away, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, you keep on doing that. You did it 8 times. Now you're done with the tawaf. And what you're going to do after that, you have 2 rakats wajib, 2 rakat behind, if you can do it behind Maqam Ibrahim, good, or anywhere in the haram. Then you'll drink Zamzam, which is sunnah. And so face the Kaaba, say Bismillah when you start drinking, say Alhamdulillah after you're done, doing 3 sips. And this is one of the du'as to make. Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi'a wa rizqan wasi'a wa amalan mutaqabbala wa shifa'an min kulli da'. And when you say shifa'an min kulli da', cure from every illness, make intention for every illness which is physical and every spiritual illness as well. And this, in general, Zamzam is lima shuriba lahu. It's for what is drunk for. So whatever your intention is, whatever your desires are, this is like this magic water, right? This magic elixir that a person can drink. And a person should drink as abundantly until they fill themselves, because the munafiq, they cannot fill themselves with the Zamzam. So we're done with ihram, we're done with tawaf. Now we're going to go to sa'i, right? Sa'i involves walking between 2 small hills, which I'll call Safa and Marwa, right? This is a reenactment of the sa'i that what's that called? Hajara alayhi salam had made when she was with Ismail in the valley. And this is only made after tawaf, right? So it's only in Umrah, right? Only after tawaf and only in Umrah. So there's no such thing as nafil sa'is. Sometimes people think like, okay, I want to do some extra ibadah, I'm just going to do nafil sa'i. There's no such thing, right? There's nafil tawafs, but no nafil sa'i. It's mustahab to have, it's recommended to have wudu, not necessary. And the sa'i is going to begin at Mount Safa. So on the way to Safa, it's recommended to do 1 more istilam towards the Kaaba. And then you make the intention for making sa'i, right? And it's the same formula that we talked about before. Let's see if I can renew this. Omar, do you mind? I think it didn't load the whole page. Should I try to relaunch it? Yeah, I'll find it. Okay, you're good. All right, so I'm going to speed up a little bit because we're getting close on time. So you make the intention and then you say Abda'u bima bada Allah inna safa wal marwata min sha'airillah. On your way up to sa'i, when you get up to sa'i, it's sunnah to make some zikr and dua when you get to Safa, right? You find a less crowded area off to the side. You're going to face the Kaaba and you're going to make dua. You recite Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, say that 3 times. Send salat on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. make dua for a few minutes. And then from there, you're going to go towards what's that called? Marwa. There's no assigned dua for sa'i, right? There's no assigned dua for sa'i. But you can use the dua, I think, of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Rabbi khfir warham, anta al-a'azul akram. But Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Abdullah ibn Abbas, I don't remember off the top of my head. But and when you get between these areas designated by two green lights, men will run slowly between those areas. And so you'll go from here's the diagram. So you're going to start from Safa. You're going to go all the way this way. You're going to run between these two green lights slowly. And then you're going to keep on walking normally until you get to Marwa. When you get to Marwa, you stop over here. And again, you make some zikr and make some dua. Or make dua. And then you're going to proceed to Safa. Going to Safa to Marwa is one round. Marwa to Safa is another round. Safa to Marwa is another round. Marwa to Safa is another round. So you're going to go through these stretches until it becomes 7 stretches or 7 rounds. You start at Safa, you're going to end up on Marwa. Every time you stop on each one of these places, you can you make dua. And when you're going through these, this is another spiritual lesson. I'm just giving you an example. One of the things you want to do is that you want to make something called dua with munasaba, right? And what that means, dua that's according to the situation. When you make dua according to the situation, it increases the probability of that dua being accepted. So give you an example. Zakaria alayhi salam, he enters on Maryam alayhi salam. He saw her with a fruit that was out of season, right? When he saw that she had fruit out of season, he said, Anna laki hada qalat huwa min indillah. She said, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna Allah yarzuqu man yasha'u bighayri hisab. Then when he saw this, then he had a shock in his heart. He said, if Allah can give her food out of season, why can't he give me a child out of season? So then he made dua for his child. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted him Yahya, alayhi salam, right? Even though he was so old and his wife was barren. So this is an idea of dua with munasabah. So what is the munasabah that happens over here? You make all the duas about the family of Ibrahim alayhi salam in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose their entire family for the work of deen and the sacrifice of deen. Ya Allah, also make me, our family, as people who sacrifice the deen. In the same way that, for example, there was Zamzam over here, and that's a fountainhead. Make our family a fountainhead and a spring for deen. In the same way that you made Ibrahim alayhi salam, kana ummatan qanitan lillahi hanifa. He was an ummah, making us an ummah. In the way that his son was so obedient towards him, he said, "Anni ra'athbuha fanthur ma'adha tara." Qala ya abati fa'al ma tu'mar satajiduni inshallah min sabirin. Give us also children like that. Ya Allah, the way the family of Ibrahim was able to sacrifice everything and have full tawakkul on you, also give us tawakkul on you, so on and so forth, so on and so forth. The way that Ibrahim alayhi salam used to give diyafa and honor his guests, also give us the ability to honor our guests rightfully, so on and so forth. The way that he gave the righteous progeny of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and you put Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and his progeny. Allah, there's only one Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, but also give us people in our progeny who reflect the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, so on and so forth. You can keep on going. You get the idea. And then after that, you're done with 7. You exit the haram, and then men can either trim their hair or shave their hair. Shaving is better, right? Then now all the restrictions of ihram are lifted, and you're considered ahlul haram. Okay. Now I'm just going to go over some spiritual dimensions. The first thing that I want to mention about spiritual dimensions is one of the most important things when you make Hajj or Umrah. This is something that people take too laxly. Is that this is a journey where a person expresses their servitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you say, Ya Allah, you are the boss, I'm the slave. You are the master, I'm the slave. And that relation means whatever the master says, you do. You don't ask why. You don't ask how come. You don't, no. It's whether it's ma'qul, is ghayr ma'qul, it makes sense to you, it doesn't make sense to you, you don't ask, right? Mawlana Ashraf Ali Thanwi, he said, let no one be around me except a Jayyid Alim or a Ashiq Sadiq. And he said the Jayyid Alim, he'll understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. And the Ashiq Sadiq just doesn't, the true lover doesn't ask questions. When we go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's house, we have to be Ashiq Sadiq. We don't ask questions, right? This is the way of the Sahaba. قَالُوا سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا. We hear and we obey. No questions asked. And so we want to follow each one of the rules. Sometimes people take, and having taqwa and being careful about doing the what's that called? All the wajibat and all the sunan and uh, staying within all the hudud, that is the most important way to have that's the, I would say, the foundational way to have a spiritual umrah. You can do all this batiniya stuff, but if you don't even have wudu and you're making tawaf, what's the point? Your tawaf didn't even count, right? Everything falls apart. Some people say, "Oh, hijab is in my heart," and the real thing is that I should just remember Allah. I don't have to pray 5 times a day. I mean, this is all just bakwas, right? This is all nonsense. The way a person express our thing of spirituality is not by just going and having these weird experiences, what they call ahwal. That's not spirituality. Spirituality is becoming 100% obedient to Allah. 100% obedient. Udkhulu fi silmi kafa. Right? There's no 1%, maybe, no excuses. Al-halalu bayyin wal-haramu bayyin. Halal is clear, haram is clear. Wa baynahuma mushtabihat. We avoid the mushtabihat. The second thing I would say that to make the umrah more beneficial is that you have to do things with adab. The more adab that you will have in any different aspect, Imam Malik, rahimullah, he wouldn't walk in Medina with shoes because he said, "What if my shoes fell on the place where the Prophet ﷺ put his foot?" Right? I did this in a long time ago when I was like 17 years old, and then one of the elders he like showed me. He's like, first of all, that the place of how Medina was in the time of Rasulullah is like the area of the masjid, right? And now you're walking on the streets, and you might cut your legs, and you're dragging, you're young and you have josh, but now you're dragging like dirt into the masjid, and so that's also not munasib. But the idea was the heart was. My friend did it with me, right? Saad Khadri. Some of you guys know him, so we were just cut from the same cloth. So what's that called? It's just Josh, but there's a feeling of love, of respect for the place, respect and honor for the haram, and so you want to color each one of your ibadah. There was one time I remember going to the haram, and I had a small pocket Quran, and I actually put it on the floor, right? When I was praying, or yeah, I think it was praying, or I just put it on the floor. And a person next to me, he picked it up and he said, "No, you should not," basically making a shot that you shouldn't put it on the floor. And I was young and I said, I have to be sincere. If I'm changing my behavior, I'm changing it for this person. That's not really sincere. So I went and put the Quran back on the floor, right? Or where it was before. And later on, you realize that that's not how things work. But you also realize ذَلِكَ وَمَنْ and then that person, still remember him telling me, ذَلِكَ وَمَنْ يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِنْ تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. These are the sha'air, these are the signs of Allah, right? If the haram, the minaret, the door, all of these things are not the sign of Allah, these aren't the sha'air, then what's the sha'air, right? You have to honor that, you have to respect it, you have to show adab with it. And there's a tremendous amount of barakah, and taking benefit from that barakah is not bid'ah. Maybe careful. You have to be careful. You can't do the things which are not impermissible. But one of my shuyukh, when we were there, he went to the haram and he was just looking at the Kaaba and just lovingly. And he's this this sort of rigid type of guy walked up to him. He said, هل تعتقد أن في هذه البيت بركة? Do you think that there's some barakah in this house? They're just very just follow the rules. This no spiritual stuff. That kind of allergic to that. He said, أنا أعتقد أن في هذه البيت بركة وأنا أيضا أعتقد من لم يعتقد هذا فهو كافر بنص القرآن. Right? He said, I believe that there's barakah in this house, and I also believe someone who doesn't believe that there's barakah, he's a kafir by the nas of the Quran. And then he recited in the Quran, in أول بيت وضع للناس ببكة مباركة وهدى للعالمين. It's full of barakah, right? This is the Quran is telling you that this is a place of barakah, so take it, right? Relish in it, imbibe it. This is another place. The other thing is that over here, obviously don't sin. Sin is basically, it's not really easy to sin over there. If you're going to sin, it's usually going to be the TV in the hotel or the phone. So be very careful, right? Or getting into a fight with someone else. Over there, forget about sinning. Don't even think about sinning. ومن يرد فيها بإلحاد بظلم نذقه من عذاب أليم. Imam Ghazali brings up this point. This is a place where even if you make an irada of sin, I'm not saying this is the ruling, but there could be mu'akhadha for that, right? You could be taken for that. And then we talked about du'as, make it with munasabah depending on the situation. For example, there's a place where Jibreel alayhi salam taught the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to pray. So when you're at that place, make dua with the munasabah. Ya Allah, this is a place where Jibreel alayhi salam taught the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to pray. Give me the prayer of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Give me khushu in my prayer, so on and so forth. Teach me how to pray. Try to help others. Be generous with your companions. Don't do any harm. Don't get overzealous and say, "Oh, I'm going to get to Hajar Aswad." I'll guarantee you the spiritual benefit that you would get from touching the black stone would completely be erased if you harm someone in your path to get there. Right? It's not worth it. Right? Just take benefit where you can and look for places where other people can benefit. We talked a little bit about symbolism. We talked about contemplation, and then look for the times and places of Qubuliya and special barakah. For example, the door of the Kaaba, Darul Arqam, where the, the mission started, the spring of Zamzam, Mizabur Rahma, the Multazam, which is the area between the black stone and the Kaaba, the door of the Kaaba. And the door of the Kaaba, remember in the old times, there was a door on the opposite side too, which is closed now. So if you can't get to the actual door, then you can go to the other side and pretend you're holding onto the door and then make those du'as with munasabah. Ya Allah, I'm at your door. No, don't throw me out. I'm holding on ala astar, Jibril ala astar al-Kaaba, lahma la tubaddil jismi wa la tughayyir ismi, so on and so forth. Hatim is a portion which is inside. Like I said, if you get inside there, you're gonna be inside the Kaaba. So if you get inside, you make the dua that Ya Allah, no one lets anyone in their house except those whom He loves. I've come inside your house. Never kick me out of the house of Islam. Never kick me out of the house of your rahmah. Never kick me out of the house of your wilaya. So on and so forth. Hajr Aswad, and like the place where the Prophet ﷺ learned to pray. So we're at 7:36. I'm going to just mention very briefly some things about visiting Medina. So because most people will go to visit Medina, and what's that called? The Prophet ﷺ said a prayer in his masjid is better than 1,000 prayers in any other masjid. And the highlight of the visit to Medina is the opportunity to visit the Prophet ﷺ and send salawat and salam directly in front of his grave, right? That is the main objective of going there. So when you visit the Prophet ﷺ, you want to recite abundant salawat. I know people who've tried to accumulate 1,000,000 salawat to give as a gift to the Prophet ﷺ when they see him, right? So, I mean, do what you can, but the bar is high. Take a shower, change into clean clothes, walk towards the masjid in humility. You can give some sadaqah before you go. This لا تقدموا بين يدي يا أيها الذين لمن تقدموا بين يدي نجواكم صدقة. Even though that this doesn't apply anymore, it's an adab that you give some sadaqah before you go and see the Prophet ﷺ, offer 2 rakats of tahiyyah, and know that the prophets are alive in their grave. And so approach the Prophet ﷺ. I don't have time to go into all the nuances, but one simple advice: approach the Prophet ﷺ the way you would have approached him as if he was alive. Right? If you can do that, you will get the whole picture. Right? That will be the ultimate lesson. Right? The feelings that you would have, the hope that you would have, the things that you would say, you just think about it like that. And really, in the back of our minds, we were like, I would come and sit here and Ya Rasulullah, Ya Allah, the only reason I would only leave here was only to do the mission of the Prophet ﷺ. Otherwise, why would I leave this place? I would just sit here in the shade of the Rawda, close to the Prophet ﷺ. There's no other place, right, for us in the world. And this is how, when you walk past, so you're going to enter into the door over here, and this will be the front rows of the masjid. And when you walk past, the Prophet ﷺ is lying on his side. His face is facing the Qibla. So the Qibla is over here. And so his face would be facing here. So you will actually be facing the Prophet ﷺ when you come to that round, the round ornament in the gate at the Muwajah Sharif. And then after that is Abu Bakr radiallahu an, and after that is Umar radiallahu an. And they're staggered there. And there's du'as that you can read, and there's salawat and things that you can do when you're in front of the Prophet ﷺ. Very simple. If you just dumbstruck and you don't know what to say, as-salatu wa-salamu alayka ya Rasulullah. Or at least have something in the back of your mind, because it can happen. You come to that point and you're just so overwhelmed, you don't know what to say. right? So at least you can say this, you can take the shahada with the intention that the Prophet ﷺ will be a witness to your shahada. ولو أنهم إذ ظلموا أنفسهم جاءوك فاستغفروا الله واستغفر لهم الرسول لا وجدوا الله توابا رحيما. Just the same way that you ask other people, please pray that Allah, make dua for me. Ask the Prophet ﷺ for, for him to pray for our forgiveness, for his intercession, and that we die as a Muslim and on his sunnah. And then the other thing, so the main thing is to visit the Prophet ﷺ. The other thing is that between the grave of the Prophet ﷺ and the member of the Prophet ﷺ, there's a garden from the gardens of paradise. And this place is called the Roda. If you want to go there, you have to actually reserve it on an app. So when you get into Saudi and you get your SIM card, that's one of the first things that you want to do is try to get, and you have to keep on refreshing it because it goes really full. Sometimes it's booked out for like months. So you just want to try to reserve your spot for the days that you will be there. And so if you get in, then if you get into that place, there's many things that you can do. You're going to pray, you're going to make dua there. There's different, pillars, and there's duas that you can make behind each pillar. But the main dua that you want to make here is that you say, Ya Allah, your rule is whoever enters into Jannah, they'll never be taken out of it. And that you have been gracious enough to enter me into your Jannah here on earth, then I also think that it will be beyond your fadl and beyond your karam that you would take me out of Jannah in the akhirah, right? That you will have to enter me into Jannah over there. So this is just one way to, and other ways to take, benefit is to read the seerah. You can take a walking tour. You can visit the museum. So in the last few minutes here, and try to end by 7:50. How do you make the most out of the Umrah? One thing is make the 5 daily prayers with Takbir al-Tahrima. And if you want to do that, you can't shoot to make the Takbir al-Tahrima. You have to shoot to be in the masjid, not at the time when the Iqamah goes off, but at the time when the prayer starts. When the prayer time comes in, that's the target, right? Because if you try to target just the Takbir al-Tahrima, then you know what you're going to get stuck in is like, oh, I had to use the bathroom last minute. Something happened with the kids last minute, and you're going to miss one salah, right? So don't take a risk. Try to be there in the masjid for the time of salah, and you want to try to make 40 salah with takbir al-tahrima. That's, get safe from nifaq and so on and so forth. Make goals for yourself ahead of time, right? Take inventory about yourself, spiritual goals, deen goals, family goals, and goals for ibadah. I want to make this many tawafs during the day. I want to make, at the very least, at least make one nafil tawaf a day, right? At the very least, make one ziyarah of the Prophet ﷺ a day, right? And anything above that, how much Quran you want to read, how many salawat you want to send, set those goals ahead of time so that when you're there, you can chase it. When you're there, don't waste time. There's a lot of distractions, believe it or not, and the distractions are only growing. So try when you're there, it's a very short period of time. It will be over before you know it. So don't take it lightly. You can try to make multiple umrahs. We talked about tawafs, reading Quran, making dhikr, making at least one ziyarah a day, trying to pray inside the hatim, trying to get to the multazam and making dua there. And sometimes when you're making ibadah, sometimes you just get tired and you just don't feel like you have enough energy to do more ibadah. So in that situation, just sit and look at the Kaaba. There's reward for just looking at the Kaaba, right? That's an ibadah that you can't do anywhere else, right? So, and especially if you're a hafiz, one way to double it up is you're reading Quran and looking at the Kaaba at the same time, right? So you get 2 birds with 1 stone. In general, this is also a trick that Mufti Sayyid Balanpuri had taught us, that way to get ahead in your deen is try to get multiple rewards from the same ibadah, right? So you're praying 2 rakat nafil, make niyyah for haja, istikhara, and something else at the same time. So you're still doing one ibadah, but getting a lot of rewards in the same type of thing. And so the last thing is I'm going to give you a daily schedule. It's just it's going to be different for everyone else. For everyone's going to have something that works for them and their own situation, but just as a rough template. So you want to get there at the tahajjud, but ideally even before the tahajjud, right? So around 2 or 3 o'clock, right? So that you can sort of spend at least the last 1/3 of the night in the masjid, right? And so you're going to stay in the masjid. Then the adhan, you make your ibadah, you pray your tahajjud salah, you read your Quran, and or you pray your tahajjud salah, and then the adhan for Fajr will go off, and use that time from the adhan of Fajr till the Fajr salah to read Quran. And inna Quran al-Fajr kana mashhuda. And then after the Fajr salah, also read Quran until the Ishraq salah, right? Then pray 2 rakah Ishraq salah, and then you can add 2 rakat duha as well, right? By then it's a little bit, it'll be light out. Then you can go back to the hotel. You can have your breakfast, and then take your rest until Zuhr salah, right? That's when you knock out. You'll get a good 4 or 5 hours, maybe even more at that time. After Zuhr, you can decide whether you have to have a snack. And this time between Asr and Maghrib, it's up to the person. Sometimes some people come back and have some more rest. Sometimes people will stay and maybe get their extra tawaf in that time. Is up to the person. After your Maghrib Salah, pray your Nafil, pray your Awabin. And some people will make the decision to stay from Maghrib to Isha. Again, that's a personal decision, depends how far your hotel is or not. But if you're Maghrib and Isha, there's not that much time between. By the time you're done with Awabin, you're gonna go back, you're almost waiting for a little while, and you're gonna have to come right back. So it's just easier sometimes just to, especially if it's very crowded, just to stay between Maghrib and Isha, right? Pray your Isha Salah, and after that, that's when you can go back, have dinner, have some family time, just sort of relax and have a little bit of rest. And it's not going to be a lot of rest, right? So even if Isha is, it's relatively early over there, but by the time you're done with dinner and talk with the families, I mean, even family time, you should wrap it up in the dinner because Naha Rasulullah in the summer, it's not good to necessarily spend a lot of time talking after Isha Salah. But sometimes there's just practicalities, things that you have to deal with, and then you take some rest so that you can get up again at 2 or 3, and then it's just rinse and repeat for the time that you're there. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, may He I don't know, we have 4 minutes. If anyone has any very short questions, we can take them. But anyone who's going, inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept and make it the best Umrah that they've ever had, and grant them every form of acceptance and elevate their ibadah, and let no one go to their Umrah and come back except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with them. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alamin. Any questions?
What's your opinion on putting on like 2 white cloths after you finish your Umrah to go to the Maqam, even though you're not like?
Yeah, it's a very hot topic, right? So can you can you put on, so there's a rule right now that wasn't there before, that if you want to be in the Mataf area, which is right by the Kaaba, you cannot go unless you're actually in Ihram, right? So what if you finish your thing and you took off your Ihram, and can you put on Ihram and go under like sort of like a fake Ihram because you're not really in Ihram, then the guards won't stop you and then you can go there. So I will tell you, I met a mufti there, and he was also in that situation. He said, "Oh, Sahaba were simple people. They wore simple clothes. We're also wearing simple clothes. You read between the lines. So there's ulama who've taken the stance that that's okay, and I've seen mashayikh that have taken the stance that it's not okay. What I can say is that look at the situation, right? If the thing, like they said, Benjamin Franklin said, wise people don't follow the rules too closely. And so the idea is if the whole mataf is full, there's people who need to make their umrah. If you're gonna go there, you're gonna make it taklif for them. You're making it difficult for them. You've already done your umrah, right? You can do ibadah from anywhere else. It's just an additional pleasure for us, but you're making hardship for others. In that situation, I say that looking at the situation, you should go to the second floor, third floor, and just keep that area open. However, if you go at 11 o'clock, it's wide open. There's literally like wide swaths open. You're not harming anyone, and it's just an arbitrary rule, right? They can't regulate it at that level where they say, okay, now it's enough space, you can come. Because when I went, for example, in February, I felt like it was like when I went with, I don't know, like 10 years ago. There's literally we were just sitting in the whole their areas of Mataf were wide open, right? So in that time, there's no harm, no foul. So I think in that situation, if you wear it, you're not verbally telling someone, I am in ihram, you're just wearing it and you're getting in. I think that would be okay. جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.